Hey, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to do our final episode in the Plague series. We're going to talk about the support units. We're going to dive into the Plague support options and we're going to discuss the strengths and weaknesses of each one. And then we're going to rank them in order at the end as we do. Before we dig in, some announcements. My Night Stalker series is incoming. I've gotten to play a couple games with them and kind of feel out what it is they do and how they interact. So that is going to be a real fun series to dive into. Wasteland Warfare series is going to start around Adepticon. Like I said, it's going to be one of those where I'm going to be kind of making the videos as I run a campaign. So it's going to be a little slower paced getting videos out because I want to make sure I understand everything as I do it, and I want to do things in a specific order. So another Firefight League is also kicking off. We do have 2 more players. We're going to have a GCPS player is my understanding, and then we're going to have a Forge Fathers player, and I believe we're going to have a total of 8 in this league, so that's great news. And then if you're interested and you're going to CincyCon at the end of the month, make sure you stop by and say hi. I'll be running Firefight and Dead Zone demos on Saturday specifically. So you can come on out. You can say hi. I'll be actually hopefully near the Hounds of War people. I actually need to make sure that that's something I can do. I haven't done that yet. But if I'm not, oh well. But anyway, stop by and say hi. You know, see how I'm doing, check in, always a good time. And then, just a reminder, if you're at Adepticon, make sure you say hi. I'm definitely going to be in the Firefight tournament, definitely going to be in the Dead Zone tournament. I'm still kicking around Kings of War, but we will see. It is something I'm leaning towards doing. I don't know that game very well, so it's very much going to be 2 days of me just getting my teeth kicked in. But again, at the end of the day, I have enjoyed the game, and that's more what it's about for me is the community and the enjoyment of it. So again, if you see me, don't hesitate to say hi. I did order some Phoenix Gaming sweatshirts to wear while I'm there, so hopefully they'll be in before Adepticon, and if they are, I should be a little bit easier to recognize. And then one more thing, we actually have a few more things, but first of all, I want to thank all of you for helping me get to 1,200 subscribers. You know, I set a very small, attainable goal, and that Old World Kings of War comp video I did really got a lot of good feedback, got a lot of good traction, and I ended up getting about 20 subscribers just from that video alone. So I do appreciate that. Let's try to hit 1,500. And then the other thing I did want to say is, because of the feedback and the reception that Kings of War Old World video got, I'm going to do a series, and it's going to really do a good job, I hope, of describing the differences and similarities between some of the games. We might do Kill Team and Dead Zone, or Kill Team and Halo, or both really, because Dead Zone and Halo are fairly similar. And then we'll do a 40K and we'll do a Firefight. So we're going to do some comp videos kind of like that Old World video. I'll probably do those more spread out. And the intention behind those, again, is not to tell people, hey, this game is good and this game is bad. It's to give you things from my perspective to talk about the similarities and differences between the games, because there's people out there who play one and don't play the other, and maybe they're thinking about getting into it. You know, if you're a 40K player and you're thinking about getting into another game, it's really just so I can explain to you how they're similar, how they're different, and maybe you'll have a better understanding of what Firefight brings to the table so that you know what to expect before you decide to buy in. So that's the intent behind them. I do have a Discord for my channel. I am always kind of revamping it. It's never really high on my priority list. There will be a link in the description. I do have some rules with the Discord channel. Like, we will not tolerate any kind of bullying. I am the only moderator. If I see it, I'm just booting people. And by bullying, I don't mind the occasional joking and ribbing. But when you're just being malicious or mean, you're gone. I don't have tolerance for it. That's not the kind of community I want to build, you know. So just keep that in mind. And then one last thing, and that's going to be our shout out for Military Gaming Command. I'm always going to shout them out. I apologize for the really long intro today. Is my microphone? Yeah. I apologize for the really long intro today, but had a lot to say. Now let's dig in. Maybe. Beep. As always, we're going to go in order as they appear on the app. First up is the Teraton. It's 70 points for a single model. They do have bulky, which means they can't go into transport, regeneration, resilient, tactician, that gives a black die, and teleport. First of all, teleport alone is like phenomenal, and that makes this unit worth taking. It gives it, using 40k terminology, it effectively gives it fly, because they can move over terrain, they can move over units, and all these things. And it also shuts off charge reactions. And if I remember right, it also means none of your charges are unhindered. Now, if you don't have line of sight, you'll still have that restriction or penalty. But it allows you to have hindered charges no matter what. It allows you to shut off charge reactions. Really powerful ability. They're armor 6. They have 4 hit points, so they're decently durable and rugged. And they throw 4 dice at AP 1, and they have anti-tank. It's kind of a weird profile, and it's really good into light vehicles and even things like a Strider because of the volume that you're going to throw. It's very versatile, and it's enough volume that you're going to win even into some of the heavier vehicles out there. You could charge a Wolverine, for example, and you should still probably get more damage than the Wolverine does when it swings back. The second Teraton is 60 points, and they're just fantastic units. They can benefit from effectively any order, and they can hold objectives if needed. They don't have the beast or the vehicle keyword, so they're one of the few units that are really good and can sit on objectives, although you probably don't necessarily want them to. Up next, we've got the Plague Strider. It has heavy armor, which is pretty rare in this army. And I'm noticing that there's quite a few armies that it's rare in, but it's pretty rare in this army. It does have controlled fire, just like every Strider does that I've seen so far. You can give it the Tank Buster upgrade for 20 points, and it replaces its Flamer, which is 4 dice at AP 1, with 2 dice at AP 4, and then it also gains anti-tank and devastating D2 plus 1. So for those that know me, know I love Striders. I think they're awesome. I think the Tank Buster is a great unit in specifically Enforcers, because Enforcers hit on 4s. It gives them a nice anti-tank punch that a lot of their shooting doesn't have, and you know, it just shores up a lot of the weaknesses that Enforcers have. That being said, I don't know that the Tank Buster is worth it. We'll dig into it later. You can side grade the Flamer Chainsaw into a heavy support, I believe is what it's called. You lose the Flamer and the Chainsaw, but you do gain 6 dice with AP1 and pinning. To me, it's a 0-point upgrade, so if you need a shooting Strider, the 6 dice with pinning is going to be a better option than the 2 dice at AP4 with anti-tank. Pinning is an ability that really benefits Plague. There we go. You know, you need to be able to pin units if they have charge reactions, for example. One of the things that a lot of, like we have two local Plague players, and one of the things that frustrates both of them when they play against Enforcers, for example, is that everything has some sort of charge reaction. So there's a lot of times where I might move and then Overwatch, or I might shoot and then Overwatch, and just be like, okay, man, you've got to come in. You know, so it's one of those, being able to pin units to shut off charge reactions or penalize charge reactions if they have the Overwatch token, very important. Base loadout is a Flamer with 4 dice, and then also the Chainsaw, which is 4 dice at AP3 and Frenzy 1. Very good melee profile. It doesn't really benefit from a ton of orders, because a lot of the orders say, you know, vehicles can't benefit. But the Plague Lord's Aura, really solid. It gives it resilient, it gives it an AP bonus, and then it stacks Frenzy. So you could also, it's Frenzy 1, so you'd have Frenzy 2. Also, Rabid Onslaught can be really strong because it stacks for Frenzy 3 on 4 attacks, and then also Toxic. Tenacious Advance can be beneficial because of the ability to maybe set up charges, but those last two are probably arguably better spent on other units. The cheaper 80-point variants, the Base Strider and the Heavy Support, provide a 7-up heavy armor chassis And it can be either a really legitimate melee threat, or you can have a pretty solid anti-infantry shooting threat with controlled fire. So again, it's one of those, neither way to build it is wrong. I think the Tank Buster is wasted points in Plague specifically, but I like the pinning and I like the chainsaw for Plague. Oh, my nose is itchy. Next up is the Hornet Dropship. It has capacity 12, targeting system, so it can split fire with its weapons. It is a vehicle with fly, so it does have to move a specific amount every turn. And if it can't move, if I remember correctly, it just dies. So if it gets pinned, it could be a little rough because then you're not able to shoot with it. But the base loadout is an 18-inch 4-dice AP1 rotary cannon. But for 10 points, you can replace it with either a twin autocannon, which is 4 dice at AP2 and pinning, with 24 inches of range. You can get a laser cannon, which is 3 dice at AP3 and anti-tank with 36 inches of range, or a missile launcher, which is 2 dice at AP2, anti-air, blast D4, and 36 inches of range. I think the autocannon and I think the laser cannon worth their points. The extra range helps. The laser cannon provides good anti-tank shooting, which this army does kind of lack. And then the autocannon is AP2 with pinning and weight of fire, which makes it just a very versatile gun. You know, so I think either one of those two are worth the 10 points. The missile launcher, to me, probably not worth the 10 points because you're hitting on 5s with almost everything that shoots in this army or worse. And couple that with the fact that anti-airs is so matchup specific. A laser cannon, you might hit on 6s or 7s shooting at another aircraft, but if it goes through, you're going to put a pin on it, you know, because it's got the anti-tank. So it's one of those where it's a trade-off. Sure, I could hit on 5's base, but I could take the -1 and hit on 6s, but if something goes through, I pin your aircraft, you know, so it's just kind of one of those, what do you want from it? I just think the missile launcher is a very matchup-specific loadout. The correctional stabilizers do give it headstrong. It's a 10-point upgrade. It seems kind of expensive for a unit with a 5-up nerve. And honestly, headstrong's probably not going to be super relevant on the jet, but it could be. You know, it's one of those where if you get hit with an anti-tank gun and get a pin, and then now you're not shooting, that may be the difference between, you know, it performing and it not performing. So having that 5-up is maybe worth it to you. I just think 10 points seems kind of expensive for something that, if you're throwing anti-tank dice at my jet, at least you're not throwing it at my aberration or my other things, you know. It does seem to have a crew-operated HMG with the ability to add an additional for 20 points. So it looks like on the app that it comes with one, and you can add a second one for 20 points. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, but that's the way it looks. I think 20 points is absolutely ludicrous for a second HMG. So unless I'm missing something, I need somebody to tell me if I am. But that just seems absurdly overpointed. To get 3 more pinning dice with no AP. And it does reduce your transport capacity. So again, if I'm wrong on how this works, let me know. But the way I read that, I was just like, this is absurd. This should not be this expensive. Then you have the Corruption, which has Inspiring, Regen, Resilient 1, Tactician, Black Die, Terrifying, Unflinching, Countercharge. It has everything, right? It's a very efficient unit for 110 points that brings a lot of pain. It's going to throw a lot of dice. It's armor 7 up with 5 hit points, so it's pretty rugged, not pretty rigged if you're watching on YouTube. 8 dice at AP3 and anti-tank is meaty, and it will win most assaults. Unless for some reason this dude whiffs. Because if I remember right, he hits on 3. So with a clean charge, you can get it hitting on 2s very easily. And, you know, depending on what order you give it, it could get Toxic, it could get Frenzy, all these different things. So, it's going to win most assaults. It's just the nature of it. And it can benefit from pretty much every order except, you know, obviously like the ghoul-specific ones, stuff like that. But, you know, the Leaper Leaders give it an extra 3 inches of movement. The other base order that gives it 3 inches of movement, so you can really make it mobile, line up good charges, things like that. It's height 4, so you can hide it behind things for cover or have bigger things to block line of sight, kind of like I do with my Rat Fiend and my Tunneler. You know, you could maybe take a Wolverine and put it behind the Wolverine and just kind of bound them up together. So you have a lot of options there. There's a person in the comments of one of my videos that had posted a list, and it's a pretty interesting list. It's very much predicated on alpha strikes, and it's a few corruptions, a bunch of leapers, and that's pretty much it. The one thing that we found, because I think we've played 3 games with it, the one thing that we found is it's very susceptible to pinning, and that is a real good way to make that list suffer, is to just pin the poop out of it. But I digress. That being said, great unit. The Hornet Gunship has targeting systems. It does have evade. It has fly. It's basically the transport, but with evade. Its base loadout is triple rotary cannon, which is 4 dice at AP1 with marksman, so it gets 3 of those, so it's 12 dice total. You can, for 10 points, upgrade one of the rotary cannons for all of the same upgrades that the transport can get, and all my opinion on the weapon loadouts still stand. Doesn't change just because the chassis changed. It has the same stabilizers upgrade also. It seems very weirdly pointed at 110. The transport is 80 points. So you can max out upgrades on the transport to get 6 pinning dice, plus the same main gun with targeting systems. And it'll have transport capacity, whereas the gunship doesn't. So it just seems kind of weirdly pointed. I think for all the upgrades, it's like 120 points for the transport. And then for this to get all the upgrades, you're basically paying 15 points-ish for evade, which probably doesn't come up a ton, interestingly. But anyway, I digress. Jets are kind of weird in this game anyway, which we'll touch on later. But I just think the gunship itself is just kind of a weird unit. And that's all. Then you have the armored car. It's armor. I think it's armor 7 up with heavy armor. It's wheeled. You get to choose your ammo, and then each option throws 3 dice. You either do AP4 anti-tank Dev D2 or AP1 blast D2 toxic and vicious. And then it does have a spiked ram at 3 dice and AP2. It's a fast unit. It's not terrible. Little expensive, I think. Countercharge is interesting, but it does hit on 6s and assault, so you're probably not winning many assaults. So there's probably not a lot of situations where you're going to be like, man, I'm so glad I had countercharge on this thing. Not a lot of order benefits. Overall, just kind of a weird unit. Then you have the Wolverine Tank. Its armor is 8, heavy armor, targeting systems, tracked vehicle, blah, 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 blah. Then you choose your ammo. It throws 3 dice with either AP4, anti-tank, Dev D2, or AP1, Blast D4 with pinning. Both of these are 48 inches. And then it does have a laser sponson, which is 2 dice with no AP and Blaze Away. And Blaze Away just seems kind of like a useless ability on this gun. So I don't know if this is one of those things where laser sponsons exist somewhere else with Blaze Away, so they have Blaze Away here. But it just seems like a useless ability when you can already throw pinning dice, so you don't need to blaze away. And if you're blazing away, then you're not shooting with your turret. So again, it's just one of those, like, I don't necessarily understand the intent here. I don't know if this was just a copy-paste situation, which is most likely. For 10 extra points, you can take a once per game smoke launcher, which is probably worth it, honestly, to give it stealth and cover for a turn. And that's assuming you don't have maybe a heavy weapons team to try to give it smoke anyway. And then its high armor and long range and decent volume in the main gun and height 4 mean it's a pretty solid unit. It is a little expensive, but like I said, with armor 8 and heavy armor, it's going to be a little bit more durable than a lot of things that you have. And then you can use it to hide and screen other models and units, like I just said. And then you can hit it with smoke to kind of add to its resilience. And then we have the Plague Mortar. Has slow reload. Remember, slow reload on vehicles just gives you a -1 to hit. and then it has special ammo, and all options shoot at 12 to 36 inches of range. You either get 4 dice at AP2, indirect, and seismic, 5 dice with blast D2, indirect, and pinning, or 5 dice with blast D2, indirect, and toxic. Overall, I think the Plague Mortar is a really versatile unit. I just think it's a bit overpointed, and again, I don't think it's huge, but we'll dig into that when we kind of rank everything. Before we get into our rankings, if you're considering getting into Plague, there's going to be some Amazon affiliate links in the description. It won't cost you any extra money if you purchase using those links, and it does give me a little bit of a commission, so I appreciate that. In addition, if you like the content, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It goes a long way to help support the channel. Moving on. We're going to look at all the support units in more of a tier list style ranking. They are definitely some standouts in support. First is the Corruption. To me, the Corruption, and the first two really, but we'll get into that. The first two can slot into any list, and they could be deemed as what we call like an auto take. The first is going to be the Corruption. It throws high volume melee dice, high AP, anti-tank, gives you a black die, armor 7 with 5 hit points. Almost every order can benefit it, and it is just a terrifying melee presence that your opponent has to respect. The high volume and efficient melee means it's going to win most assaults, even into hordy units. I could see Stalkers struggling to win an assault, even with their high volume, just because, again, still got to get through that armor 7. But overall, man, Corruption, to me, you could put it in any Plague list. Phenomenal. In second place are the Teratons. The teleport is insane, and it does keep them charging and moving without having to worry about, am I going to get no +1 to hit and a -1 to hit. I can just move through terrain and stuff. It just keeps them very mobile. They have the same order efficiency as the Corruption. They have Tactician also. The biggest drawback here is that they're only AP1. And with anti-tank and AP1, it means you do have to be more choosy about what you charge. You're probably still, probably still winning most assaults into vehicles. But there's going to be some things where you're going to be a little more leery about sending a Teraton in. If you've got 2 Teratons that are throwing 8 dice at AP1, you might not be as excited to charge into, say, like a unit of Assault Enforcers as you would with the Corruption, because the Corruption's just going to be that much more efficient at smoking those Enforcers. And third, I'd probably put the Strider. This is one I had to think about quite a bit. It's very cheap access at 80 points to a heavy armor unit. It does have 4 dice at AP3 and melee, and there's some orders that it could benefit from. I think the Plague Lord's order is probably one of the best because you don't have to specifically target the Strider. It's an aura, so it can just benefit from it by being there. The heavy support side grade does give it 6 pinning dice, and then, like I said, it loses the chainsaw. But 6 pinning dice at AP1 is a very versatile chassis. The only thing it's not going to do great into is anything with heavy armor, anything that's armor like 7-ish. Because armor 6, you're still knocking at the 5s. It's still a 50-50 die roll. And unless it's a vehicle or a construct, you're able to put pins on it. The higher volume is going to make it good for maybe if you're playing against Asterians. Shoot with that to try to peel some shields off type of thing. So overall, I just think the Strider is a versatile unit. I don't think the Tank Buster is worth it. If you need anti-tank shooting, I think there's just better options in this army. And one of those better options is what I put in 4th place, which is the Wolverine Tank. I do think it's a little expensive at 135, and not that it's overpointed. It's just one of those where if you're playing like a 1,250 point game, that 135 points and a support slot might be a little hard to justify. But once you start getting into those 1,500 and higher games, I think the Wolverine is probably much more of a standout. But it brings a great anti-tank gun, 8-up heavy armor, really durable. You can hit it with smoke, keep it in cover, keep it on the table longer. Its height makes it a great shield for things like the Corruption and the Plague Lord. Again, it's very similar to how I would use my Rat Fiend and the Tunneler, just don't get the shield bubble. And as I've already stated, it's probably not the best use of points in smaller games. And fifth, I have the Dropship. It does have good transport capacity, and it is armor 7. And if I remember right, like the Enforcer jets are just armor 6, because if I remember right, almost everything in the Enforcers is armor 6 unless it's a Peacekeeper of some kind. It does have really good weapons upgrades. I think the jets in this game, not just this army, but this game, are the epitome of average. You know, I've yet to see one where I'm like, ooh, that's an auto take. But for the most part, I don't think I've ever seen one where I'm like, that's just trash. You know, my experience with them is that they tend to survive for a turn or two. So it's really just on your ability to maximize what they can do for that turn or two. If you can trade them well, then keep bringing them. Do your thing. If you struggle to trade with them, then obviously it's just not for you or your playstyle, which is why they tend to be mid to low tier when I rank any of the jets. The flying vehicle does make the transport option very dangerous, because if you lose it, you could just lose whatever's inside of it if you're not careful. You know, you've got to be more mindful of what you're doing with it. And overall, like I said, it's just one of those where the jets are just hyper mid. There's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing right with them. They do what they do and probably will die by turn 3. Sixth is the Gunship. It has all the pros and cons of the transport, except it can't transport and it's more expensive. You lose pinning to gain marksman. You gain some AP. It's one of those where overall, I don't know that it's worth the extra points. If you disagree and you're like, hey man, this thing's actually way better than you're giving it credit for, by all means, let me know. I've never seen anybody put the Gunship on the table. I have seen the Dropship on the table. So it's one of those where, based on my experiences with the game, I assume that a lot of players kind of agree, because I've never seen the Plague Gunship on the table. Seventh, I've got the Armored Car. It does have, you know, heavy armor and 5 hit points and 7 up. 120 points seems a little pricey. Yes, it has, you know, good speed at 9 and 15, but it does hit on 5s with 3 dice. And, you know, for 15 points more, you just get a tank that does the same thing but better. You know, so that's kind of where I'm at with it. And then I just see Countercharge as a wasted ability on the Armored Car. When you assault on 6s, I don't see the point behind putting Countercharge on this unit. It's probably a flavor thing, would be my assumption, and that's fine. I'm all for it. I'm talking from an efficiency standpoint, because you pay points to have Countercharge, and you have what is effectively a useless ability in terms of what this unit brings to the table. And then in 8th, I've honestly got the Mortar Mule, and a lot of it is just because that thing is 145 points. So in a 1,250-point game, that one unit is more than 10% of your army. That's a lot. And it can't hold objectives. It doesn't have Tactician. It's not surprisingly durable or anything. I understand why it's expensive. Indirect can be a very powerful ability, and if it were really cheap, people would just spam them because, bam, I could just sit back here and shoot. And I understand that. And I don't think they need like a huge points drop. I just think, man, something about it just seems off. You know, maybe a 5 to 10 point drop, something along those lines. Put it around the same price as a tank. Or maybe give it a smoke option for its gun in addition to for 145 points. Make it kind of like the specialist teams, where it's like, okay, well, I can smoke or I can do all these other things. That's kind of what I see when I look at the Mortar Mule, is it just looks like it's missing something. Overall, I don't think any of the support options for this army are what I would consider bad. It's just some are definitely much better than others. That's going to wrap us up. I want to thank everybody for watching. Reminder that our Night Stalker series is coming soon. And a reminder that if you like everything, make sure you hit the like and subscribe. And I'll keep the content rolling. Thanks a lot.